So that's my
So
point.
in the meantime, in J, aside from transfer of ownership or transfer of a tenant change,
Mhm.
which, you know, somebody could live there for 5 years.
Right.
If the tenant finds out, and let's just say that they're not a voucher tenant where they're getting their own CMHA inspection, they're unhappy with something that they've asked the landlord to fix, or something, I mean, if it's something that needs to be fixed, aside from a stove or refrigerator, it could be a code violation because you have to fix it. So
Mhm.
would they be able to call the building department for an interior inspection in the meantime if they feel there's something wrong with the unit?
Oh, of course. Well,
So I mean, you
that's
know,
normal.
they're still kind of protected, as in the tenant being protected against, they're not all good landlords, you know that.
Well, there's a lot
So,
of tenant landlords,
you know.
so there's a lot of tenant landlord organizations, you know, the tenants' right people and that. There's all kind of ways that they can reach out to organizations to help them in their negotiations with the landlords.
Mhm.
But again, our phone rings every day about, you know, complaints from tenants on the landlord. We are allowed in the unit if the tenant lets us in.
Right.
So if a tenant has a complaint, we'll go. And we'll say, okay, if it's legitimate, then we'll follow through with the complaint process. We'll notify the owner. And if they don't comply, we take them to court. And there's a process for that, that's normal operations. You know, we get that from tenants all day long. Now, some of it's legitimate, some of it's not. You know, some of the tenants just looking to break their lease, you know. Some of it's, so it takes a determination, you know, and it's at our discretion as to how far we go with it. Sometimes we refer them to different agencies, you know, here, there's tenant landlord associations to deal with,
Right.
you know, this or that, but if it's a building code violation and it's legitimate, we will follow through, we'll cite the owner, we'll take them to court. You know, as staffing allows.
How often do you need to inspect a unit to ensure that it's up to code?
With this, it'll be only on change of occupancy. So if someone's in there for 10 years, they're in there for 10 years. They're living there, they're living there.
Is
Unless
that
there's
status,
complaint.
I mean, that's what's written, but
Yeah.
what is the ideal? What do you think?
When you buy your house and you get an occupancy permit, the building department's not gonna knock at your door every 2 to
Right.
5 years to see if you're,
We look at the
Interior
exterior.
conditions.
Now, in some municipalities where we have just a change of occupancy. Now, there's some that dual, every 3 years. They inspect everything, but they got 15 units, not 2,000. You know, every 3 years they're doing an inspection, and they do it on change of occupancy, they do a dual. Some municipalities just do every 3 years, period. Whether they're occupied, unoccupied, you know, whatever it is, they're doing it every 3 years, if they have the staff. Some do change of occupancy only. Some do change of occupancy, as in Bedford Heights, they do change of occupancy, and then every 3 years they do an exterior in a public hallway, so they can make sure that the public areas
well, the
are
fire department, do they still do that?
And fire department,
In
when
the
they have
apartment
staff.
buildings, they actually go and they check the units, and
Yeah,
they check
yeah.
these smoke detectors in the common
Yeah,
areas.
I'll tell you, just
Yeah.
as an aside, folks, I'll tell you that the fire departments now want to privatize the fire marshal services because they don't have the staff to do the fire inspections. So we're looking into privatizing the fire marshal service so that we can have annual inspections of all the businesses because the fire departments don't have the staff to follow through once even if they do the inspections. There's one department that sends out a form. It says, write your own violations, and then send us in the form when you've completed them. Really? That's your fire marshal service. So it's becoming real critical that we, as a team, come up with new ways to do some form of service that would be a compromise when you're to a department that's fully staffed in all areas, you know.
Like, in your opinion, I think that the single-family homes, two-family homes, would probably have more transient tenants than possibly an apartment building because I think there's more longevity in an apartment building. What's your, if I could ask you?
I have tenants who've been there since the day I bought the building 30 years ago. And I have some that, some units that every year, people just, my husband is because they don't want to clean, but that's besides the point. Every year they,
Yeah.
they stay for a year and then they leave.
I think it depends on.
Depends.
I don't think there's any clear, I mean, you have better access to a greater number of these kind of things than I do, but in my experience, there's no clear, some houses change every year and some apartments change every year, it just depends on the people you're getting in. There's more of a transient nature I'm finding with the younger CMHA folks rather than the seniors. The seniors tend to stay where they're at until they die. But the younger families tend to move around. That's what I'm seeing. I think it's an age demographic.
We have the opportunity, as well as you do, to always, amend and change the ordinance. I think when we're looking up a little bit, maybe we can revisit this next year to see if we can maybe impose a 3-year interior inspection possibly on some of the units. But I think right now, just given the manpower, we would be more complaint driven, if anything, which we are now anyway, if there's a tenant that's disgruntled.
Right.
So I think we're still okay as long as we still capture the exterior, which, you do in a way anyway, because you have eyes on the street with just council, and,
Right.
all the buildings on the main roads are fine, and you know who the landlords are that are the more Huffman and the more.
Yeah, and again, I welcome all the eyes and ears on the street from all the council people. I mean, for me, that's a big help. I'll take offense to you calling me and say, hey, I got this address. I can't always follow through immediately, but it makes me aware that there's a problem with that unit. And with my one inspector is in between, he goes out. Now, the mayor gave me Daryl to do all the complaints. So that's who's been handling high grass and complaints. Now, when the high grass season slows down, then Daryl will be able to handle more of these type of complaints.
Right.
But when my inside administrative person takes a day off, Daryl's off the street altogether, and he's inside doing administrative duties. Now, in addition to Daryl, I have one rental point of sale inspector, that's Dan. He's here for 8 hours a day. I could use 4. When I started here, I had 4. I had 2 administrative assistants and 4 housing people. Now I'm down to 1 administrative assistant and 1 housing person. And
Aren't we generating enough out of the permit fees in order to supplement the salaries of more people?
I would say that I don't get into the finances of the thing. I don't know. I know that the fees go into the general fund, and the general fund is light, and that's the money goes down the, where it goes. I would say this, if the building department, if all the money stayed in the building department, that was generated by the building department,
Oh, yeah, you'd be self-sufficient.
I'd be self-sufficient in a minute.
Absolutely.
And not because I'd raise fees, it's because we have that amount of work. I could put 4 guys on the street and get all the inspections done. And I would love to have 4 people on the street all day. It would be great. Because then be able to handle complaints, point of sale, rentals, interior, exterior, property
God
maintenance.
forbid you become proactive instead of reactive.
Oh my.
That would be your dream, wouldn't it?
I would love that.
Wow.
Actually, I feel like I come to work every day handcuffed, and I do what I can. And we've had to cut back and cut back and cut back just for your earlier comment. So Georgette did blow her brains out. I have her shutting off the phone when there's 6 people out in the lobby. I have her closing the office for an hour in the morning, closing it for an hour at lunch, and closing it for an hour at night, and closing it on Friday. That window right now is only open 24 hours a week out of 40. That is so she can catch up on it. One person can handle keeping up with the paperwork that does funnel through. So I have 1 administrative assistant in the building department for 24 hours a week. That's all that window's open, period. The other time, she's trying to keep up with the amount of paperwork because there's no one to help her. Last year, we had 2 people at the window and 3 women all day. There was 5 people inside that office plus 4 inspectors. So we had 9 people sitting in that room where there's 2.
You don't even want to see the amount of files that we get.
Oh, of course.
Just while we're on finances even,
Sure.
if we have roughly 2,000 that we register at, we'll say, well, we make $100 a pop, it's $200,000. So, you know, there's money generated, whether it gets back to you is another question. But what is the percent of turnover in rental units throughout the year?
You mean from the first registration? I don't think you have year to year that many, you know? I mean, like if somebody goes in and then halfway through the year they bang out?
No, I mean, throughout a year, what percentage turnover?
Oh, rentals?
As more or less, I'm asking how many people stay in from year to year, as in they extend their lease beyond 1 year, and it's the same occupant the next
I
time
don't know.
around.
I don't have a handle on that. Maybe our landlord
I
can tell
thought I
us
just
her
asked that
experience.
question.
In general,
I think
is it a
it's kind
20%
of,
turnover, 30% turnover?
I don't think it's quite that high. I think maybe, I would say somewhere between 10 and 20%.
Okay.
It's just gonna depend on, a lot depends on the economy,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
A lot depends on,
To individual
you know, whether
property.
their families are growing. I mean, there's a lot of,
Well, and if they can still pay their
My
rent.
question
So-
is, maybe you can answer this, are the CMHA tenants more likely to turn over or the ones that pay on their own? That's a
My
question.
inclination would be the CHMA, and this is from my experience with.
They turn over quicker?
But I mean, I have, that would be speaking to Hoffman's properties. I
Oh.
mean, that's an isolated situation, so I mean, I would have to do a larger study beyond the property.
I think in general, you might be
CHMA
right.
though, it's a big, I'm sorry, I mean.
No, go ahead. You're fine.
CHMA though, it's a big there's a process,
Mhm.
a moving process that takes, you know, they just can't decide they're gonna move and move like a regular lease tenant would do. I mean, you have to give notice on their forms and everything has to be according to CHMA's timeline, which could be, you know, 30 days, it could be, end up being 60, 90 days,
Sure.
so.
The reason I ask is because not all of these fees will be collected every year. If 70% or 75% of people are staying,
Sure.
then you won't be going in to inspect, and so therefore you won't be collecting the $75.
Correct.
Right.
So to have a number would be, I think, helpful also as we think about it, because it's not $200,000 annually.
No.
It's only going to
A
be
percentage
a
of that.
percentage of that.
Makes sense.
But that could inform what we set our rates at, because we need to make sure that we are paying, we want to at least be sustaining this manpower that it takes to process all of this.
You need
Well-
paid more than that though, because if you do your pie chart and see how much rental registration actually takes part of versus the permits that we have, because some of the permit fees could also go into manpower too. So we have to figure
Well, I
out
think
how
One
much.
piece of the pie.
I think
Right.
the $75 registration and the $50 license, I think you can't take it as a whole, I think you take it as an individual. In other words, every time it happens, it has to pay for itself.
Mhm.
And I think it does that with these fees. So every time remember, if there's no inspection, there's no fee. If there's no fee, well, we're not spending the manpower. So I think you set it up so that it pays for itself every time, not as a whole. I don't think it's a problem of fees. I think it's a problem where the money goes after it comes in.
Yeah, that's a totally different discussion, but yeah.
Yeah.
Because my thought is, what we're not even figuring into this is enforcement. There's no enforcement element of this. This is the property owner coming to us. This isn't someone looking through files, making sure people aren't delinquent. This is not someone following up in any way right now.
How so?
What do you mean, how so?
I'm asking you, delinquent in what?
As in, it's a year from now, did their tenant sign another year extension, or did they get a new tenant in? Because either way, they need to
Oh.
be providing that information for the tenant.
Right now, they're supposed to come in December and re-register and update all the information.
See, that's the confusing part, because we just said you just said a
They won't
moment
do
ago that they only need to come in whenever our tenant changes. But
Right,
now there's
yes.
something about December coming in before January
The
1st.
current policy is every December, the landlords come in and re-register. no fee.
That's what struck out.
That's what struck out. We killed that because there is no enforcement on that. There's nobody there to follow up on any of that. So we struck that out and said, look, you got a change of occupancy, come in. Since we're not enforcing it anyway, we have a useless ordinance. I mean, you want to keep it in, keep it that way, I'm okay with it, but there's nobody following up on that anyway.
It sounds needless if you're asking them to register when a tenant changes.
Mhm.
Why are you asking them to register before the end of the year?
Exactly.
Doesn't seem
Especially,
to make
it's
sense.
okay, well, it's all about monitoring and making sure that they're doing the change of occupancy. So
Mhm.
if you ask somebody to sit there and go over all this stuff, hey, I got 2,000 of these sitting in front of me.
Mhm.
Now I'm gonna make sure that every one of them was here last year, and they're not new people.
Or do we have to flip through paper? We don't have this on some computer software somewhere?
Well, we now have initiated our impact
Yeah.
software. But all the prior stuff,
Yeah, it was
I got
paper.
stacks this high.
Well, yeah, but we're moving forward now. You've been here for over a year.
We are moving forward, but we have stacks this high that have never gotten put in.
Yeah.
They're not
History
in, they're not
is not
inputted.
there.
We don't need history. We only need 1 year of history.
Yeah, but they're not getting inputted because there's nobody to input them.
That's the question I'm asking. So they're not being input.
No, they're just sitting in boxes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So you're getting where we're at here with the manpower. You understand that all these policies, I love them. And you've come to me with several processes. That they're great ideas, I'd love to initiate them.
Capacity.
Huh?
You have to have the capacity.
Oh, sure, sure.
Well, that's why I'm looking at the fee structure and trying to estimate how much money we're gonna bring in, because we'll never get out of where we are if we don't look at that. If we don't say, how could we fund the not just the inspection part of it, not just the filing part of it, but the follow-up part of it. Because if you don't because say we could, and this is speaking in a vacuum, as if all your money came right back to you.
Right.
We could
That's
say,
the ideal situation.
what if we added $5 to the fee? We'd be able to fund a part-time person who could who could follow up on all this stuff and manage that.
The thing we added when I came in right away was administrative fee for the point of sales. Because we were on the escrow. We took in $425,000 in escrow money the year before I started. Our administrative people took in the money, the finance people took it in, they doled out several checks, did all that paperwork, and we never collected 10 cents of an administrative fee. So we handled almost $500,000 worth of money, doled it out in several different checks, did all the paperwork, handled all the work, and nobody collected an administrative fee. And so that's what we changed when we first came in. There's an administrative charge now for that. So at least we cover our people working. Now, the state doesn't want us to make money on this per se. We have to be careful that we're covering expenses, not making money. That's the general idea. We're supposed to be right there between the black and the red with these departments. I won't speak for anybody else's department. That's what the Board of Building Standards tells me. So I really try to be cognizant of what it actually costs us to do a thing and what would be reasonable for my inspector to go out the first time, do the inspection, and then do a follow-up inspection to make sure that everything's done. So it covers 2 inspections at least and the paperwork. So that's how the fees are generally developed by us, okay. And if flunks, we have language in there that says a re-inspection fee can't apply if you continue to flunk or you no-show. If you call my guy out there and you don't show up, a re-inspection fee could apply. So, we put that language in there, but it's just tough stuff, you don't wanna.
So is there an admin fee onto this, or is this exactly
It's in-
okay for breaking even? Is in there?
Yeah, that's what we figured. It's hard to judge, even, it's hard to judge really, unless you got an accountant guy to figure out, okay, how much does it actually cost you to do a thing? We try to take the averages of what the other cities are doing, where they charge it without being exorbitant. It's not an exact science. It could be an exact science if you have the manpower, but we do the best we can with it, I think.
So we've narrowed it down that there's only really two things going on. It's the registration and then the tenant license. It's not three things. So there's only gonna be two fees. There's only two documents. There's a rental registration document,
Right.
and then there's the tenant license document,
And the reader form.
which is part of the tenant, isn't it?
Well, it's a separate paper that goes to Rita, so there'd be actually 3 pieces of paper probably that,
Mhm.
you know, that we would develop. The landlord portion, the tenant portion, and the Rita form.
Mhm.
I think that would cover the packet,
Mhm.
and then we move forward. That was my general idea.
Yeah.
Do you give a reader form to the new, or a landlord that you've never heard of before, or to someone that's coming in as a new person acquiring property?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, they all, as to what they do with them.
But you don't collect them,
No, it goes right to finance.
meaning they don't drop them off to you and then you take it to finance and whatever they do with them, that's what you mean?
Yeah, you know, we're trying to get out of, we're trying to, once we get the Rita forms, we give them to
Oh,
them. Yeah, we don't wanna, you know.
Right.
But you do
But they do
collect
come to
them
you
for,
first.
Right, they come back
The
physically.
landlords,
come back.
too.
Yeah, they come
Okay.
back, yeah.
There's no fee, is there a fee in here for, hold on, does the landlord, according to the new language, once the year term is up, or year lease is up, are they required to file something even if their tenant stays?
No.
Nothing at all?
No.
Okay,
That's what goes on now.
right. Is that the way it's gonna be in the future?
No,
'Cause-
change of occupancy only,
Mhm.
because we're not following up on that anyway.
Mhm. I think that would be wise, because that would be one way of helping to naturally catch things.
If you have somebody, it's in the language now. It's in the language now, and
What's in the language now?
the fact that they have to re-register every year. That's re-registering every year, right now, regardless of the tenant change. You come in,
Well, it's impossible to follow up if you don't have that. You have no right to then go ask, because they'll just say we have the same tenant.
right,
So, but regardless of whether they do or not, they could just say that, and then what right would you have to
right,
check up on it?
you're absolutely right.
So it seems advisable then to consider putting that language in there so that there is the opportunity to follow up.
Okay, here's the conundrum now, and here's what goes on. What goes on, I'll tell you what goes on now with that one little portion. A landlord comes in February, says, I was out of town, here's all my registrations, nobody changed, but here's my 20 registrations. George Up adds 20 times $50 late fee, and now you're trying to collect this money from this guy for showing us that stuff a month late.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. Tenants are still in there, he just didn't give us the forms on time, and we're charging him a late fee.
That's what late fees are for.
I get that.
I don't see any problem with that.
I don't see any problem with either if you have the person to follow up on it, and we just don't. We just don't, when they come in, we don't notify anybody. No, we don't call anybody up and say, hey, you didn't bring in your forms. Nobody's doing that over
You were just talking about someone coming to the window with their forms late.
I get that, and then that's when we catch them now. But if a guy doesn't
Yeah.
come, we don't know.
Well, they're not gonna come if it's not required.
They're not coming now.
You just said an example.
I give you an example of a guy who does come,
Okay.
but they're not all coming, and I'm not checking.
Yeah.
I'm not checking anybody. I don't have a list of all our apartments and all our apartment owners, and I'm not, hey,
You should.
huh?
You should have that.
I think you
yes.
should.
I think I should too, but I never did, and there is no record of one.
Uh-huh.
We have no idea.
That's a problem, though. I mean,
Sure, it's a problem.
I can get you
That's a
a
problem I
database of it,
inherited.
but even if I give it to you,
And-
what would you do with
And
it?
what would I do with it? Now, that's exactly the problem.
No, it's not at all a problem. It was perfectly easy. Even if you put them in an Excel spreadsheet, all you do is you'd have the date it was filed, you'd put a conditional formatting on it, anything over a year old would flag red, you just look down for red. And you're like, oh, Daryl, just like anyone does, they call and say, go check so-and-so's
Daryl.
house on,
Daryl.
such and such, and go check this out.
Who is gonna go
Yeah.
check it out?
Yeah.
The person who's gonna collect the $50 every time we do that.
The secretary? We have nobody, he's.
You guys can
he's
cry a
there.
river all you want, but if we keep saying we don't have people, then we're not gonna get nothing done. So we need to figure out
Well,
That's
you
what
give
we're
me
saying
people.
right now,
You
we're
give me
not getting
people.
anything
Well, I think we need to have a conversation about that. though.
I think we do.
Yeah.
Listen. what
But it's
all
not
we
But that's a
want-
separate conversation.
It's not what-
Well, it's all tied in, because here's the deal. Building departments run with feet on the street, and administrative assistants, period. No administrative assistants, no feet on the street, no services. Now, you call it crying a river, I call it reality. I had 9 people, I got 2.
It's reality, but we gotta figure out what we're gonna do about it.
Give me people.
And just reduce services every time, or just say,
That's
oh, well,
exactly
we
what
can't do it the way we used to do it.
And we can't.
That's
Well,
exactly the
Or
problem.
we keep all the ordinances on the books, and we don't do it.
Mm.
And we just run status quo, and you leave everything the way it is. We do what we can with what we got, and stuff falls through the cracks, and when we get more staff, we enforce them.
Well,
I'm changing ordinances, and I understand, believe me, I understand your reticence, because we're actually cutting our policing power, we're cutting our accountability to the landlords, we're cutting what we're doing for the residents, we're cutting, and we're putting it in ordinance so that we're cutting. But I'm driving the ship here, and I have all these programs. I have permits on 11 different type of inspections, I have point of sales, I have rentals, I have property maintenance, I have business maintenance. I have all these programs, one guy.
Planning and zoning.
I have planning and zoning, well,
Well,
but now here's the
I
problem.
understand,
My
I understand.
My Dan is, in rentals and point of sales alone, he is
you can,
please
please don't quote any more number. I understand.
He's 7 weeks, well,
I
you're quoting
understand.
numbers, you're telling me, hey,
Here's the challenge, though.
No, listen,
It sounds like we need to have a different conversation about those things.
okay,
And I'm down for that. I'm 100% down for that conversation.
You can meet with him at any time. baby.
So, but here's the challenge I see, is that we're doing things the wrong way. We're trying to make do with the status quo, so we change the ordinances, we make everything fit the status quo, when maybe we should be asking if the status quo is what we should be adjusting to. If perhaps we need to change the funding for the building department. That sounds like the real issue, is how much money you
And where
get.
are we gonna get it from?
That's a conversation worth having, I think.
here.
Well,
something-
and that's
that-
also
no,
for the fire
I
department.
walk in,
and everything
you know,
else
I
is
walk
fine.
in, and here's the thing, I walk in to a building department when I walked in, it was understaffed, and they had 4 housing inspectors, 2 administrative assistants, and a bunch of volunteers. At that point, given the propensity of work and the size of the community, I felt we were understaffed, based on my experience with multiple communities. So this is not my first pony ride. So understand. Then, month by month, they've cut the staff down to,
3 people.
a mirror image. And I understand why. If there's no money and we're in the hole, I understand that, and I'm left to deal with what we have. My idea of changing ordinances is to meet my reality. I understand your reticence. You want to change ordinance for the current reality if the reality is going to change. I'm not privy to that. I don't know when the reality is going to change or when the finances are going to change. The last 3 levies has failed. I don't see the constituents voting for one to pass, unless maybe we cut so many services, they finally wake up and say, oh, we better pass something.
But the bottom line is, even if they pass, we're still at status quo. It's not gonna refund the building department, it's not gonna open the fire
I
station.
think that's why we need to have the conversation, because we're letting a very important service
Oh,
die. How do you think we're gonna increase our property values when we don't even have people in the building department to inspect?
I'm with
You guys you're kidding yourselves. You think the city's gonna recover
Right?
by cutting the most important
Are you not
service?
preaching to the choir?
Well, am I?
The 2 departments,
Are
yes,
you-
you are.
am I
The 2
preaching to the choir?
departments
You
that
don't
make
think-
money in the
Listen,
city.
I don't know
is
that
the
I'm
building
preaching to the
department
choir.
and the
Why,
police
now, why
department.
would you? why
I'm
would
talking
you-
to the
You're not
council
preaching to
members here.
anybody.
Well, why would you think that a building official wouldn't want to do the best job he knew how to do?
I'm not talking about you. That's
Oh,
why I'm,
Oh, okay.
I'm
She
not-
said you're preaching to the choir, we're the choir.
No, we're the choir.
no, they're the
I'm
choir.
Oh,
These are deeper conversations that
oh,
we need
okay,
to be
okay,
having.
I thought you, listen, man, I would love to walk in here with 10 people and turn it around, you know. You have no idea.
The way I see it is
Now, a lot of
you're,
cities are cutting these types of services out altogether. Just let me make that clear. There are cities that are dropping point of sale, they're dropping rental registration, and they're doing permit inspections only. And it's complaint driven only. Now, even the more affluent communities that we deal with are doing those types of things because they want complaints, they want high grass, but they don't want to pay for the staff. You know, my business exists solely because the cities can't afford full-time departments anymore.
Well, the crazy thing to me, though, is that your department, most building departments, from what I understand, are pretty much self-funding. So as long as you're not top-heavy or administrative-heavy, then you should be bringing in more than enough to fund you. So it doesn't matter how big or small you are.
Where's it go?
You should,
You hear him say
I
general
understand
fund.
that, but that's why I mean, that's another discussion.
Yeah.
I think you should be as big as you need to be because you are self-funding. It doesn't matter whether you have 15 people, as long as they're busy, their paychecks are paid for through fees.
Make it
Okay, so
so.
what do you
So,
suggest?
make it so
Instead
for
of
me.
we're going
I
around
think
and
we need to have-
around.
well, this-
and
that's what I'm
around.
saying,
So
this is a
could you
different
stop and
discussion.
get off the Ferris wheel here?
Well, make it so for me, and I will.
Well, that's you're on my calendar actually to contact you about that, because I want to have this conversation to see what
What the real staff for this city needs?
what would happen if we were to, bring up the staff, because I believe it would fund itself. I believe it's not like, oh, we don't have money for it, we would have money for it
There were
if we
about
could
20 people in
enforce.
the building department.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's real easy to tell you, here's what I need. In Euclid, for instance, I have 7 housing inspectors and 3 administrative assistants for the housing side alone. Housing is the quagmire. This is what we're talking about. Permanent side's pretty easy. I can make do with 2, 3 building inspectors in any city, anytime. Over here, I can make do with 2. Cross-certified guys. You know, my guys on my staff, my MBIS staff, are doing all the permanent inspections here, no problem. 24 hours, we're there. We're catching, we're doing it all. The housing, that's where all the work is. That's where the city rises and falls, that housing. I believe as the housing stock goes the city. And it's the biggest headache, the biggest problem. And then, I'm gonna say this, I know, when the politicians get involved in selective enforcement and dropping those services, man, you can see it right away in housing stock. It dies. I'm not
But
saying
you
that's the
also
case
need
here.
to
I'm not
see
saying
in
that's the case here,
cities.
but that's my general purview. As the housing stock goes, so goes the cities. And when we go to these national meetings, the ICC meetings, that's the conversation. Protect these housing stock, because your city goes down with it.
But what's the first department to get cut?
Building, we're the low-hanging fruit.
Always.
Because we don't have unions.
Right.
But the silly thing is you're self-funding, so you didn't save any money. How did you save money?
Goes into
Ask him
general
how much
fund.
money we owe him.
How
Ask him
much?
what he got paid
Listen,
last year.
How much revenue does an inspector bring in through permits, through the inspections he conducts?
Well, let's go for my guy Dan.
Yeah.
My guy Dan can do, point of sales and rentals, he can do 6 to 7 a day.
Mhm.
He's getting $100 each,
Mhm.
6 to 7.
We're not paying him $700 a
No.
day, so it covers itself. So
Absolutely.
cutting him, if we were to cut him, wouldn't save us any money,
No,
right?
no, you're right, and it's overall payroll that they're cutting. In other words, when they're looking at their city payroll, who can you cut without getting squawked at? We're all at will.
Right. I understand, but it doesn't make sense to do that.
No, well.
When you look at the numbers, doesn't
Well,
make
I
sense to
agree,
do
but
that.
you can't cut police, and you can't cut fire. Because those are considered a life safety. I personally believe, this is my career path, I believe that the building department has as much to do with life safety as the fire department.
There aren't fires if your houses are kept up.
Well, this is just my opinion,
It's fact.
Well, and nationally, this is what we get from senators and councilmen and, that on a national level, governors, state fire marshals. On a national level, they believe the importance of it. Fortunately, when a politician at the top has to make cuts, what's the path of least resistance? Service, if they don't have any finance, community development, recreation, building. Police and fire are the last ones to get cut, and they make up half the payroll.
Mhm.
They make up half the payroll, and they're the last to cut. And I get it. But I'm at the bottom of the barrel here.
Mhm.
And believe me, I am not disagreeing with your point. I am trying to dovetail ordinances to make them do what I got. Because I cannot do what's on ordinance right now. I'm not doing it.
You can't have laws that you can't.
You're talking about the end of the year, registering by the end of the year.
Any of this, I'm not doing any of it. Well,
Mhm.
I can't have one rental inspector 6 weeks behind and make a landlord wait till
Oh,
I
yeah.
6 weeks. I can't have a real estate agent call me. I got a real estate agent call me every day. You're holding up my transfer.
Well, the way to do that is to hire another inspector even before doing this.
Every week I ask. Can I put it
And
back?
if that guy would make enough money to cover his salary,
He does.
we would
He
break
would.
even.
He does.
He would.
And so why aren't we doing it is the question.
Ask the mayor.
Okay, we're the council. We run the show around here, guys.
We don't hire. We don't hire.
Oh, but we can give directives. We can
And
appropriate.
he vetoes.
Yeah.
So, and then we goodness, you guys are.
Well, and here's what cares, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I do not have the ability to drive that bus. I gotta go along with whatever I'm dealt with. I walked in and my administrative assistant was gone without notice.
Mhm.
No training. And they brought the girl over from,
He let her go without you even knowing it. Has that been the first time?
okay, that's his right,
Mhm.
but on a moment's notice, I